Welcome to this video on Spring Boot profiles and configuration management. In this video, we'll do it in 3 steps. So we would start with setting up an application. So we have an application which we built during one of our courses. So we'll use that application as the starting point for this video. So the first step is to set up that application up. The second step would be to understand what options application.properties provide. So application.properties is the most basic of the configuration management options that Spring Boot provides. So we will start with that. So we'll start looking at what are the options that application.properties would provide. And last but not the least, in the step 3, we would look at profiles, which is one of the beautiful concepts that Spring Boot brings in. And it has great support for profiles as well. So profiles allow you to have configuration which is changing between different environments, as well as dynamic beans configuration as well. So all those things we would look at during the subsequent steps. Welcome to this step 1, where we're going to import an existing project into our workspace. The project that we are going to use is something which we created for our course on Spring Boot tutorial for beginners. This is a course on developing simple REST services with Spring Boot. As you can see, it has great ratings, as well as it's a course of about 6 hours in duration. I'm on 38 videos, and it's an excellent course. You can look at the reviews as well. In this course, we developed a complete REST application step by step. What we'll do is we'll take this zip, we'll import it, and then we would use that to understand the concept at hand. How do I import that project in? Down below the video which you are watching right now, in the description, there'd be a link to the zip which has the code for the project that we would want to import in. So just click that zip, download the zip into a folder, and extract it to a folder. So if you are on Windows, probably you can extract that zip to C:/some folder in there. And if you're on Mac, do the same thing. Just put it in some folder, and then you can go ahead and import it using Eclipse. So file, import. So I've taken the zip, unzipped it to a folder, and now I'm saying file, import existing Maven projects, and I'm pasting in the folder path. So I'm pasting in the path where that particular folder is in. You can also browse to it as well. So you can do browse and select that folder. Once I do that, this would come in. So you would have a pom.xml which is coming in. Now I can go ahead and say finish. You'd see that the Eclipse would complete the import of the project, and this project would come in. So this project, if you look at it, contains a lot of code. So there is a lot of Java files as well as resources, tests. Once the application has imported fine, you should see a folder structure similar to what we are seeing in here. And also you should see a few or quite a few Maven dependencies come in as well. So you'd see that there would be a host of Maven dependencies which would be there. So that's a clear sign that you got everything working and you are ready to run the application. So how do you run the application? Source main Java, go to com in 28 minutes Spring Boot, student application. So it's a typical Java application. So all that you need to do is run as Java application. This specific application uses a embedded server. That basically means Tomcat is also built into the application. All that you need to do is right click run as Java application, and it would launch up the Tomcat server with our application deployed. For more details about this specific application which we just launched up, you can visit our website springboottutorial.com/creating REST service with Spring Boot. This article is a long article actually taking you through the entire journey of creating the REST service that you are looking at right now. So if you are interested in more details, I would recommend you to look at the description and click the link there. So you should find a link with www.springboottutorial.com. Just click the link and you should be able to understand the details of how to invoke the REST services and things like that. If you're new to Spring or Spring MVC or Spring Boot or Eclipse or Maven or JUnit or Mockito, in the article, you should find references as well. These references are basically 1-hour video courses on all the popular frameworks. So these are very popular videos with more than 100,000 views. So I'm sure you'll find them useful. Now that we have the application set up, and also we can see that the server has started up, we are ready to get into step. Now that we have the application set up, we are ready to start step 2, where we are actually discussing about the configuration management options in Spring Boot. The basic thing about Spring Boot is it looks at application.properties. So source main resources application.properties. That's the file which Spring Boot looks for to load up all the configuration from. So that's the first basic thing about Spring Boot configuration management. All the configuration can go into something called application.properties. One of the things that you can see in here is the logging level. The logging level, we are configuring it to info. So we are saying for org.spring framework, we want to use a logging level of info. You can configure other stuff as well. As you can see in here, I'm putting an app.name is equal to in 28 minutes. We have a service in the welcome controller exposing the URI/welcome, and this service is the one which is using the value from the property file. So this is how you use a value from the property file. So I have a welcome.message. So I have a welcome.message in here which says welcome message from property file, welcome to something. That welcome message is auto wired in using the at value annotation into the welcome service, and the welcome controller uses the welcome service to return that back. So if you go to the URL localhost 8080/welcome, you'd see the welcome message at the top of the screen. You can also see that this is coming from here by changing it. So welcome message from property file changed. So you can see that as soon as I change this, the server loads up, because this is the magic of Spring Boot developer tools. As soon as the server starts up, I can refresh this and you can see that I'm getting the new one. That's basically localhost 8080/welcome. The example we saw until now is basically a message in the property file being picked up by one of the services, one of the controllers, one of the Java files which is present there. You can also see that this message is using something called variables. So even inside the property file itself, we are using variables. So I'm saying welcome to $app name, and the app name is defined in here. This is also one of the features of Spring Boot configuration management. So you can have one property and you can use that value in multiple property values. So that's cool too. So that's the second thing about your properties configuration in Spring Boot. So first thing which we looked at until now is the fact that we have application.properties from where all the properties are picked up. Here you can configure things like logging, or you can add in your own properties. So I'm here adding a property called welcome.message. The second thing that we would look at is what we call the hall browser. So if you go to URL localhost 8080/actuator, so it's localhost 8080/actuator. If you go further down, you'd see something called config props. So if you go to config props, click the link here, you go to config props, then you'd be able to see all the properties that are offered by the built-in frameworks. So for example, I would want to configure a data source. How do I do that? It's all in here. So if you want to configure the URL for a Spring data source, this is the way you do that. So you would say spring.datasource. For example, URL, or you can say spring.datasource.password, or you can see that spring.datasource.name. By default, it's testdb. What we are looking at is localhost actuator, and we went to config props. So if you turn the actuator on and go to config props, you can look at all the configuration options that you have. So all these options which are present in here, you can go to application.properties and use the properties in here to configure your application. If you are using Spring MVC and if you want to set the default locale, or you want to log something or things like that, then all that you need to do is say spring.mvc.locale is equal to your locale. Or you can configure the view resolver by saying spring.mvc.view.prefix is whatever prefix that you would want to give. You can configure, you can see that the header that is used to resolve the locale is also configurable in here. So this shows you all the things that are configurable in application.properties. To summarize the discussion until now, application properties is the key place where you can configure stuff for Spring Boot. You can configure logging, you can configure your own properties that you would want to use, or you can use the properties which are pre-built into the frameworks. Spring Boot has a lot of starter projects, right? You have starter web, you have starter data, you have starter JMS, and a lot of things. And if you want to configure them, then you can use all the properties which are present in here. The other option for configuration management that Spring Boot provides is something called configuration properties. So if you look at it here, we are defining a simple Java class, basic configuration, with a boolean, a string, and an int. So the value of basic value, message, and number. So I'm just giving an annotation configuration properties with a name of basic. So what I can do now is I can say basic.value is equal to something. So I can say basic.value is equal to true, basic.message is equal to this, basic.number is equal to 200. So all the things which are present in here, I can configure it in the property files. So typically in applications, if I use this kind of an at value thing, what would happen is I would have at values spread across the application. So in all my services there are at values, that's where all my property strings are. So if I want to find out what are all the application properties that our application is supporting, it's very difficult because I have to search for at value everywhere and find out what's happening behind the screens. But if I'm using something of this kind, then all that I need to do is have one configuration file, so one configuration class actually, and that configuration class defines all the properties for that specific application. So I define all the properties that I need in here, and I can configure them from application.properties. And once I have the basic configuration loaded, it's very easy. I can auto wire the basic configuration in. So we have the basic configuration loaded in, so we auto wire it into wherever I would want to use it, and I can say configuration.get message, get number is value. So we have a URL called /dynamic configuration expose. So let's go ahead and invoke that and see how that works. So I'm calling localhost :dynamic configuration. Oops, Safari is not playing well. So let's go ahead and use Postman. Postman is my favorite tool to execute REST services. So I'm saying localhost 8080 /dynamic configuration and doing a send. And you can see the response coming back. It says number 200, message welcome to in 28 minutes, value true. So it's picking up the values actually from where? It's picking them up from application.properties. I can change it. Welcome to in 28 minutes changed. I'll wait for the application to reload. Magic of Spring Boot developer tools in action. Application has loaded up. So I'll go to Postman, send the request again, and you can see the changed message in here. So how is it happening? So the way it's happening is welcome controller exposes this dynamic configuration. Into this dynamic configuration, we are auto wiring basic configuration, and we are creating a map with message, number, value with the values which are picked up from the configuration. And this configuration class, if you look at it, has an annotation called at configuration properties saying basic. So basic.value is picked up from the application.properties. It's auto wired in here as well. One of the things that you would also recognize is if you just say instead of like this specific thing is accepting a number, right? So 200. Instead of that, I would put some string value in. What you would see happens is that the application does not start at all. So this is also called type safe configuration, because whatever configuration you are putting in is now type safe. So if you make a wrong type in the property value, then the application will not start up, and that's cool because if some configuration is wrong for my application, I wouldn't want it to start up at all. In the step 2, we looked at all the different things that can be configured from application.properties. The first thing is your logging and things like that. The second thing is your own properties that you are defining in your code. So I define a property called welcome.message in my code, and I'm using it in here. The third thing which we looked at was use of configuration properties. We created a simple class with value, message, and number. We kind of auto wired all the properties to this. And we also discussed that this is type safe as well. So those are the 3 things that we looked at in step 2. Now let's move on to step 3, where we are going to discuss another important topic in Spring Boot: profiles. So what is a profile? So if you look at the property files right now, I have 3 properties, right? Applications dev, application/prod, and application.properties. So the reason why we have different kind of properties, the reason why we put things outside our code into properties is because we would want to be able to configure different properties in different environments. So for example, this basic.message might be something in a dev environment, it might be something different in a production environment. That's the reason why we want everything to be configurable. And profiles help you in doing this. One of the ways you can do is actually, like, you can override the application.properties like you can one of the things you can do is not put application.properties in your deployable and make it available on your environment. Then you would not need profiles at all. But the beauty of profiles is that you can leave the application.properties in here, and in whichever environment you are in, you can configure that particular profile. So let's say application.properties would have all the default values, and I would put the production specific values in application-prod, and I'll put the dev specific properties in application/dev. And there's a specific way you can use the properties from there. So if I go into the application.properties, I can configure the active profile. The way I do that is saying spring.profiles.active is equal to whichever profile you would want to use. For example, I want to use a profile of dev. So the values from application-dev.properties will be picked up. So if you see it, the logging level I'm using in the application dev properties is debug. So let's see if it works. So I'm saying active profile is dev. So the default logging level we have is info. So you'd see that only the info level things are being printed. All the debug level stuff, if you see the console, they are not printed at all. So the only thing which you'd see is like at least info level. So debug level is not printed at all. But now you would see that when I save this, the values which would be picked up, like you can see that the debug level logging is also happening. Let's also take one more thing. So let's say the default application.properties is configuring basic.message to welcome to in 28 minutes changed. And I'm going to application-dev.properties. I'm saying welcome to in 28 minutes in dev profile. Let's save this, wait for the application to reload. So we are in dev profile, so I should get the message from the dev profile. So you'd see that the value, okay, you can see now that the value comes from dev profile. So it's picking up the value from dev profile because I set the profile. What is the profile I'm asking it to use? Use dev. So the same thing is if I let's say I can change to prod profile. So you can have different kinds of profiles and you can load different sets of property values based on the profile. That's one of the biggest advantages of using profile. So I can change the profile and change the values that I'm picking up. So all that I need to do is have a value called spring.profiles.active saying which profile is active right then and there, and Spring Boot would start giving it preference. So anything that is defined in application-dev.properties will have preference over application.properties. So whatever you define in application-profile.properties will override values in the application.properties. That's one of the advantages of profiles. The other advantage of profiles is that this is kind of static configuration, right? We are configuring the framework or things like that. There is also the option of dynamic configuration. So let's say I want to configure only a certain Spring Beans in a dev profile. So I can say at profile dev, this is an annotation, and I can say define the beans that are active in the development environment. And you can say at profile prod and configure the beans that you would want to be active in the production environment. So let's say the caching between your development and production environments are different. In dev, probably you are using a simple cache, but in a production environment, you are using, let's say, something like Hazel cache, a distributed cache. Then you can say add profile prod and configure all the things related to Hazel cache in here. And this would have a simple Java, like probably a collection based cache configuration. So your cache in different things will then be different. So you can, that's another thing that you can do with profiles. So in this specific video, over the course of 3 steps, we started with configuring our application so that we can play around with it. In the second step, we looked at all the dynamic configuration options we get through application.properties. We looked at type-safe configuration. And the third step, we looked at profiles and we saw how profiles make the whole thing dynamic. We saw how profiles can be used to override property values. And also we looked at how to use profiles to override certain things in the beans. So this is kind of a demo, but if you're really interested in building this application step by step, we do that in our courses. So we have more than 3 courses. Each one of them are 5 to 6 hours duration. You can find the details in the description of this specific video. At In 28 Minutes, our focus is on making you an expert at Spring Boot. We have created a complete website on Spring Boot at www.springbootutorial.com. The link in the description of video would take you to a page where you find details of all the courses, videos, and the articles we have created on Spring Boot. If you love our videos, you would love our courses too. Our courses have great reviews on Udemy. You can see some of the reviews in here. And there are also articles on basics of Spring Boot, auto configuration, startup projects, startup parent, REST services, web application. All the code examples, we have Maven projects which are present, which you can directly import into Eclipse and start running them, and other references as well. This page would be a great start for you to become an expert on Spring Boot. You might also want to visit our website www.in28minutes.com, all other courses other than Spring Boot as well. Thank you for all the support you are providing us. We would not have grown to 52,000 on Udemy. We would not have such great reviews on courses on Udemy without your support. We would not have been able to grow to 28,000 subscribers and more than 3 million views without your support. We want you to learn and make best use of all the courses that we have. Good luck, and I will see you in the next video or the course. Until next time, here's Ranga from In 28 Minutes signing off.